What you see on the screen now is a file similar to what we used in an earlier lesson. And in that lesson, we were talking about how all of the elements that you create on the page are contained within boxes, that thing that we call the CSS Box Model. And we can see that here, for instance, like with line 1, we see here the H1 style. I'm going to come over to the style section here in my HTML code, and we're going to create an H1 selector. And here for the properties of the H1 selector, I'm going to put border 1 pixel solid black. Now I hit Control S to save that, and here you can see that this is the border that goes around. And if you recall, the space outside of the border is called the margin, and then you have the border itself, and it can have a width of anything from 0 up to as high as you want it to be. And then between the text and the border is something called padding. So what I want us to do is take a look here at some of these different H1 settings in the paragraphs in order to see what these are. But first I want to come to my styles, and I want my styles to be more than just H1. So let's go ahead and give the H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. Let's give all of these that same border. So I'll hit Control S to make that happen in 3, 2, 1. All right. So notice how that for the H6 that the height of the CSS box around this element is quite a bit shorter than the one for H1. And so what we want to discover in this lesson is how we can find out exactly how big that is. Because when you look at our CSS code, we are not specifying at all how tall these letters are. So what pixels are they? How big are the letters? And what I want to show you is something called inspect, and it's part of your browser. And let me show you how we can get to that. Now, before I get to that, I have to show you that this is the browser that's being used by Brackets. And here in Brackets, I've clicked to enable this live preview browser. And so that as I write and save my code, then I can see what it's going to look like in this browser window here. Now, the way you get to the inspect is you point at what you want to look at, and then you right click, and you come down to this thing called inspect. It's an option called inspect. And this works on any browser. All of the browsers have an inspect option. And sometimes it may be called inspect element, but they're all basically doing the same thing. They are inspecting that element, and they're going to help you to find out what the properties of that element are. So here we are. We're going to click inspect, but doing it inside of this browser that is the live preview browser for Brackets is a bit of a problem. Let me show you. I'm going to click inspect, and it opens up all of the information at the bottom of the page. It gives me all the functionality of inspect. But notice this little comment up here in Brackets. It says live preview was canceled because the browser's developer tools were opened. Now what that means is that if I make any change in my code here, that it's not going to show up over here in live preview. So what I want to do actually is just close this. In fact, I want to close the whole live preview browser. And then I'm going to come back over here and open that up again because I want the live preview to function. As I make changes over in the styles, I want you to be able to see that here. So what I've done is I've just gone into my regular browser, my Chrome browser. And this looks exactly the same as this other one because they are the same. It's just that this browser is not being used as a live preview like this one in the back here is. So here are the same things. So I can come now to this style H1 element. By the way, I need to click on refresh to make these boxes show up. And I'm going to right click and inspect. And now you can see with brackets that brackets does not give us that little warning, and the live preview browser will continue to operate as it should. So I come down here and notice what happens is that as I move my mouse over each of the different elements down here, notice this is showing me my HTML code. There's the doc type declaration, there's HTML. Here's the head section, if I wanted to look at that. And here's the body section down here. And here are the paragraphs. We can click these little spinners and make this spin down so I can see everything that's contained within that paragraph element. Or I can spin it back up just so that I see the opening and closing tags. There's the closing body. Here's the closing HTML. So you can see everything, all of your code right here. Now, over in the window on the right, and I'm going to widen this out just a little bit. In the window on the right over here, we have the first is styles. Now, these are not the CSS styles that I've written, but this is what the browser is giving us. And one of the things it gives us is this neat little box down here. So I'm going to come back up and point on the H1 line so that I can make sure that H1 is the item being inspected here. And I come over and I can see here that when I hover over the middle of this box, that this is where the content should be, and there you're seeing the content. And as I move beyond the content to the padding area, if there were any padding, it would show in green. Now move to the border, and there's the border. And I don't know if you can tell real well, but look at the color differences between the border here and the borders of these others. When I hover over border, you can see that it changes that color a little bit, and so I can see that this inspect down here is actually looking at that border. And then if I go to margin, then I can see this area. See the colors for margin, this sort of a tan colored, and you can see that same tan color up there around the first line that says this line is styled as H1. So this is showing you in a picture form the CSS box model, and it's giving you all of the dimensions of everything. If I come to this away from styles tab and I come to the one called computed, here is that same box, and you get the same action with all of these as you move the mouse. And then if you come down, you can see, for instance, that the border bottom is 1 pixel. Of course, all of the border is 1 pixel. So there's the bottom border, and bottom left, bottom right, bottom top. And you can see everything about this here. And we can find the font size right here. Here's the font size. And the font size of that H1 element is giving it to us as 32 pixel. And that is equivalent to what we call 2 EMs. And we'll explain all that later when we get to how to size our fonts. But it has a value of twice the normal size. So the height of this H1 line up here is twice the size that we see down here in these paragraphs. Because in the paragraphs, that's going to be 1 EM. And this one up here is 2 EM. But this is where we would come and find out what size is that thing. And we'll see here that the browser, by default, without telling the browser what to do, the browser automatically shows us that the size of that font is 32 pixel. And it says 2 EM, and it says it's using the user agent style sheet. The user agent it's important. I'm going to explain later about what that is. But right now, basically understand that user agent means what browser are you using. And right now I'm using the Chrome browser. I could be using Firefox or Edge or Opera or some of the other browsers, but right now I'm using Chrome. And it's telling me that the Chrome browser is using 32 pixels as the style for this H1, and that's by default inside of this Chrome browser. So if I come back over here and I come down to paragraph and click on this paragraph, so here you see this paragraph right here, this first one right there, and so you can see the margins with that tan color and so on. So we'll come back over here and we'll go to computed, and we can look here at what our dimensions are here. we can see there's 16 pixels, and that's 1 EM, 16 pixel. And so there we have the content. There's the padding in green. We don't see any green, do we? And the border, we have not put a border around our paragraph. So we'll just come back over to our code over here and do that. We'll come right under the H1, H2 code, and we'll put in a P selector, and then our opening curly bracket, press down on that, and then we're going to say border is 1 pixel. Let's just make this one blue. And then I'm going to hit Control S. Before I do that though, I want to click on this so that when I hit Control S to save, you can see the differences that happen over here. So 3, 2, 1. All right. So now we can see the box around the paragraphs. And I need to open that other browser, and I need to refresh this. And when I refresh it, then I get the borders around these paragraphs. Now, what I want you to see here in this is this. As I said, when I hover over this box, you can see the blue for the content, the green for the padding, and you can see there's no green showing up here in any of these paragraphs. So what I want to do is come over to the paragraph style rule, and I want to put some padding in there. Let's say our padding is going to be, let's say, 10 pixels. And again, what I'm going to do is press on Control S, and notice what happened here in this paragraph. Control Z to undo that. Now watch here in these paragraph boxes, Control S in 3, 2, 1. All right, so now we see that there's padding between these elements, between those boxes. Now come back over here, and I'm going to refresh this, and we get the same look. We get the same padding between the border and the text. And now when I come back and hover over the text, I get the blue again. Now when I hover over the green, I can see the green. And so that's showing me where the padding is. So you're going to get confused about what is padding and what is margin and what is border. As you're getting started in writing this HTML and CSS code, you're going to get confused about which one is which and so on. And so what you can do is you can point at an element and right click and then pull up the inspector, and then you can come down and use this box down here to help you to find what it is that you're looking for. So here is the content. I slide it up to the green, and there in that box I can see the padding, and it tells me the size of it right here too. So it tells me the size 934 by 36 pixel, and here we have 10 pixels, and the border is at 1 pixel. So if I come back to my paragraph style rule over here, and I make this style rule to be, instead of 1 pixel, let's make it 5 pixels. And so here, watch the size of the border around the paragraphs. I changed it to 5 pixels, and 3, 2, 1. All right. So now I have a much heavier border. I'll bring over this one where I can inspect that element, and I'll click refresh, and there you can see. Now I'll come down to the content for the blue, the padding for the green. I come up to where the border is, and now it's pointing out that border. Now remember, we have up here 3 different paragraphs, 1, 2, 3, and if you look down in the code, I'm highlighting the very first one. So this is the first paragraph right here. Here is the second paragraph, and the third paragraph is right down here. But right now I'm pointing at this first paragraph. And so when I ask the inspector to tell me about this top paragraph that I'm actually looking at, even though they're all going to be the same, that when I come and I hover over where the border is, notice how it changes the color of the border. So it helps me to focus on what I'm actually trying to look at, which is that first paragraph. Now if I come above it and I click on margin, now you can see that we have margin above the border and below the border, but we don't have any margin on the left or right. So let's come back to our code over here, and we're going to hit enter, and we're going to type margin. Let's put some margin all around this thing. So we already know we have margin above it. So let's do it like this. We'll do margin right, and let's call that 20 pixels, and margin left 20 pixels. Now again, we're going to have to move this over. And here we go with Control S in order to see what happens to the margin around this paragraph, this first, second, third paragraph. So here we go, 3, 2, 1, Control S. There we go. Now pull back the real browser, and I'm going to click refresh, and again, watch what happens around these boxes. So we have the refresh. Now we have margin on the left and margin on the right, and you can see that the difference here, the margin for the H1 through H6, it still comes out to the edge of the page. But here in these paragraphs, we have the same 20 pixel margin on both sides. Now, if I come down to the inspector again and hover over margin, now you can see that I have margins on all 4 sides. And so what I'm trying to show you is that the inspector can help you to understand where the margin is, what comes next. It's the border. What comes next? It's the padding. What comes next? It's the content. And so you can hover over these things and find out where things are. And then you can also come to the computed section here and scroll down and find out exactly what size those objects are. So the inspector is going to be very important for us in the future as we try to understand what we're looking at and how we can manipulate these things that we're looking at.